Welcome, friends. It's Frank here, and today's topic is that of Jesus Christ and the death penalty, or is he against the death penalty? The reason why I bring this up is about a week ago, Bishop, I think it's Mari Emmanuel from Sydney, he's from the Orthodox faith, was attacked in midway through his sermon by someone who, for whatever reason, attacked him with a knife. What followed after that attack was that he survived. He forgave the person there and then following a little stint in hospital, he forgave him again in his hospital bed, and he called for all Christians to obey the governments in their pursuit of justice, to be law-abiding citizens, and he said to be like Christ, that Christ was not for eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, just paraphrasing himself, but to forgive. And I think he quoted those people that he forgave on the cross before he died. So I want to go through some of that information. It is a very important topic. We see that the Australian government is pursuing X, or former Twitter, to not release or to pull down these events, especially the stabbing events, across the globe, across their global sites, not only in Australia. And of course, this is going through the courts, so we'll wait to see what that brings, the results from there. But let's get back to this thought then, seeing that he raised it up. Is Jesus against death and death penalties? How would you say? Interesting, if we look at the scriptures, in John chapter 10 verse 10, we see that the thief does not come except to steal, to kill, and destroy. That's what Jesus said. But notice these words. He says, I have come that they may have life, that they may have it more abundantly. So the mission of Christ Jesus, it seems, that he has come to give people life, not death. In 1 Corinthians 15 verse 26, the Apostle Paul said this regarding the resurrection and death. He said this regarding Christ's goal. The last enemy, this is 1 Corinthians 15:26, the New King James Version, the last enemy that will be destroyed is death. So death is clearly an enemy of the Lord. Hebrews 2:14 says this, inasmuch then as the children have partaken of flesh and blood, those who believe in Christ Jesus, right? He himself likewise shared in the same, that through death he might destroy him, that is the devil, who had the power over death, that is the devil. Says it. So Jesus' goal then, therefore, is as we're starting to see, is not to put people to death, but to destroy him who has the power of death. So does Jesus have the power of death? How would you answer that? What about the Father then? Does he have the power of death? Matthew chapter 12 verse 25 says, but Jesus knew their thoughts and said to them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself will not stand. Now, why would we use that? Well, if death was on the agenda, then he would surely be divided or contradicting his own statements regarding bringing life, giving life, and making enemy its death. That death is his enemy, not a friend, not a partner, not coexisting. It's like darkness and light. They just don't exist. So these are just some things to think about. Now let's get to the scripture that actually Bishop Mari Emmanuel quoted, And it's found in Matthew chapter 5, verse 38-39. It says, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth." So this is something that was talked about in text to the Jews. So he's saying this. He's just repeating, right? You heard this, right? Then verse 39, he says, "But I tell you not to resist an evil person." Isn't that interesting? How he links now that with an evil, someone that is potentially an evil person or is an evil person. Then he says, "But whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other to him also." Now you've got to remember, the Sermon on the Mount is not a sermon on way of living. It was their rules that he was highlighting to them. Now, isn't he, by quoting these texts, is he trying to do a contrast of sorts? Yes, he's trying to contrast something to the people so they can see, hang on, he's talking about one person. He's talking about the enemy and what the enemy is introducing. Because then he goes on to show how deadly these rules are. It is the Sermon on the Mount is a killer sermon, not a friendly sermon, as we've led to believe in Christian religions, as we are led to believe. Then he says this, "You heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy." Hate your enemy. "But I say to you, love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you." Now here we see a contrast between what was old and what is now being introduced to them, which would have been foreign to their thinking, because they would not have done these things. Let's have a look at another account in Luke 22, verses 50 to 51. "And one of them struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear." You know the account where they came and grabbed him at night before his kangaroo court that they set up for him, and then his ultimate execution. So here, Peter strikes the high priest's servants with a sword and cuts his ear off. But Jesus answered and said, permit, even this. And so he touched his ear and healed him. Jesus healed him. Oh, just think about that, right? Remember, the theme is Jesus against death and death penalties and destroying of life? Well, the answer should be obvious to you, where Jesus sits. In Luke 23, 33 to 34, it says, "And when they came to the place called Calvary, there they crucified him, and the criminals, one on the right hand and one on the left. And then Jesus said, 'Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do.' And they divided his garments and cast lots." So instead of promoting, "Father, get them," it's, "Father, forgive them." Why? Because they don't know what they're doing. If they knew what they were doing, I guarantee you they would not have executed Jesus. None of them would. So what is Jesus' will then? Well, he's definitely against the death penalty. He is death. Death is his enemy, not his friend. So why would he use it as a means to get vengeance of anything or hurt people in any way? Why would he use something that is his enemy? It will go against the principle, if you like, about, what did he say, about a house divided against itself? Every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, right? It goes against that idea completely. But what is Jesus' will? Basically, Jesus' will today, therefore, would be this: don't sin. All right, as a believer, don't sin. We are not born to sin. In fact, once we believe, we accept Jesus Christ into our life, sin has been displaced, cut off. We are now born again, born from above. God has given us a good heart. Ezekiel 36:26 tells you that. He's removed that stony heart as an unbeliever, the enemy of God. We're no longer his enemy. We've been reconciled to God. He's done an operation on us, removed that stony heart, give us a heart of flesh, poured his love into that heart, give us the indwelling spirit. We have the indwelling spirit. We have a new spirit, new thoughts. You can read about those ideas that I just mentioned in the new covenant. And so, Jesus' will, therefore, is don't sin, don't punish, and sin no more. Where do we find that? Well, it's interesting in Exodus chapter 20, verse 14, it says, you shall not commit adultery, right? Let's have a look at this as a test case. And the punishment for that is in Leviticus 20, verse 10. The man who commits adultery with another man's wife, he who commits adultery with his neighbor's wife, the adulterer and adulteress shall surely be put to death. There's a law there. That is a death penalty. Now, if you go to John chapter 8, verses 3 to 11, it says this. Then the scribes and Pharisees brought to him a woman caught in adultery. And now, was it set up for her to be caught? We don't know, but she was caught, trapped in this situation. Then it says, and when they had set her in the midst, they said to him, Teacher, this woman was caught in adultery in the very act. Now, it says, now Moses, in the law, commanded us that such should be stoned. But what do you say? Now, the next verse in 6, it says this. They said, testing him, that they might have something of which to accuse him. Notice? So this could have been a whole setup, that even this poor woman got caught out in the setup. Because the whole idea was to get Jesus and see what he would say, right? It's crazy, but it seems that way. And then it says, but Jesus stooped down and wrote on the ground with his finger, as though he did not hear. Sometimes it's good not to hear these things, right? So when they continued asking him, he raised himself up and said to them, he who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first. So again it says he stooped down and started to write on the ground. Now some have thought, what does this writing on the ground mean? That's another question, right? We're not too sure, but there's been some interesting ideas about that. Then those who heard it, being convicted by their conscience, went out, one by one, beginning with the oldest even to the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. So after all that question, there was only two of them left, Jesus and the woman. Now when Jesus had raised himself up and saw no one but the woman, he said to her, Woman, where are those accusers of yours? Has no one condemned you? She said, No one, Lord. And so Jesus said to her, Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. So we can see that Jesus' will is don't sin, try not to get caught out in sin, but it can happen. We are saints today, friends. We are not sinners, but we are saints, and sometimes we will sin. But be confident that there is no condemnation in us. All our sins have been forgiven, past, present, and future. That's what the blood of Christ, that is the power of the blood of Christ and the assurance we have. Nothing can separate us from God's love. He's not going to get you. He's not out to get you. That is not his will at all. He's here to give us life. Jesus, for sure, is against sin. And Just remember though, death is his enemy. He came what for? To destroy Satan, who has what? He has the power over death. It seems to me that Jesus and the Father do not have power of death. They don't have it. Now you might think to yourself, when I look in the Old Testament though, I see Yahweh putting people to death. Now that's another topic we've touched on in previous videos, and I'm going to come back to that, about discerning matters about Yahweh and who he is. But we know for sure, just looking at those few texts, that Jesus is against or does not have the power of death. And Jesus refused to kill the adulteress according to the law. So he had the opportunity, he could have, but he chose not to. Was he not fulfilling the law? Didn't he say, I've come to fulfill the law, not to destroy it? There was a perfect opportunity to show that he was 100% with the law. Yet he fulfilled the law. So which part of the law then did this fall under? Where does this bracket of this incident fall under? You see, friends, we've got to be careful, right? We start pointing fingers and judging people, thinking that this is okay. Now, don't get me wrong. There is a place to name and shame, even, especially when people are against the grace message or the grace gospel. I think there is a balance there, but not to go overboard and continue destroying people's lives. You know, if we're doing that, maybe we're not hurting people or slandering people, but nevertheless, if we look at Jesus' life and the way he went about his ministry, we see that he was all about healing, restoring, reconciling people back to God. And he was, one, exposing the enemy behind the lies, the enemy himself, who he was, and then the truthfulness of the Father. Remember, they were confused about who was the Father. It was like, we don't know who the Father is. Tell us. Is he Yahweh? Who is he? Right? Because obviously they knew Yahweh, but did they really know the Father? It seems not. It seems there is a topic that we need to continue exploring on this journey. Now, I'm just being a Bible student, as it were, as a believer, a child of God, understanding that there is some question marks over these issues. But going back to the topic, is Jesus against the death penalty? It seems that he is. It seems that's not part of his way of dealing with things, dealing with people who are sinners. He's about restoring people, bringing health to people, healing people, not hurting people. And as a saint, as a believer, yes, we're going to fall over, but he's not in the business of removing the indwelling spirit that is sealed until the day of redemption. Once you're saved, you can never lose your salvation, friends, and that's guaranteed because of that sealing and because of Jesus' blood. It's something that, unfortunately, Christian religions have not taught properly. They've mixed the covenants, mixed God's grace with works and conditions, and unfortunately, it is not a true message that you're hearing. But I thought I just wanted to address that particular point. I've gone a little bit off topic, but bringing it back, Bishop Mari was correct, I believe, when he said that, Jesus isn't in the business of returning an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and therefore he rightly, in his capacity as a person, forgave his attacker. Okay, so, that was a good thing. I think for him, he showed that he's a very loving man, and that the love of Christ you can see that's in him coming out with not only his words but also his actions following these horrific events that happened to him. Thanks for listening, guys. Have a great day, and let me know if you have something else to say. Please let us know. Take care.